We are back. Congressional negotiators say they've reached a bipartisan deal and a framework for a government funding package. As Congress tries to avoid a government shutdown when funding is set to expire this Friday, the government's not shutting down. And I know we always say, oh, they have to avoid a shutdown. Yes, they're going to avoid a shutdown. The question is, are they going to fund the government a piecemeal, or are they going to fund it in a bigger way? Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is supportive of the budget framework. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy says he is not, preferring to see Congress punt funding for next year when his party takes control of the House, and he hopes he wins the speakership. But McCarthy's speaker bid remains in danger from conservatives to his right, who haven't budged in their opposition, even in the face of lobbying by Donald Trump himself. That's according to some reporting out of the New York Times. So joining me now is our panel. We have Teresa Kumar, President and CEO of Voto Latino, NBC News contributor, Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason, and Republican strategist Matt Gorman. Jeff, it does seem as if Donald Trump's lobbying isn't working, is this a reflection on McCarthy or a reflection on Trump?
Or both. I mean, it's certainly a reflection of the numbers. The fact that their very, very limited victory in the midterm elections just didn't give him a lot more of a margin for victory. But I think you're right to ask that question. I mean, I think it's a reflection of Trump for sure. I mean, McCarthy is Trump's man.
These people don't feel like they have to deliver for Trump, do they?
They don't, and that's been sort of one of the main lessons of the last 2 or 3 weeks is that Trump absolutely, from his own rollout to the results of the midterm elections to what we're seeing with McCarthy right now, does not have the power that he used to have.
You know, Matt, he's got one senator that supports him. He's got a handful of House members. Now, that happen to be, some of the House members don't like McCarthy, but the fact that his calls aren't working, I just think this is almost more reflective of Trump than McCarthy.
I agree. When I read that story, I thought the exact same thing. And look, I'm not saying that he absolutely cannot be the nominee, but saying that this is 2016 all over again, we all counted him out before, I think that fundamentally discounts the current climate. And one of the biggest things for me is those strident voices are a lot less vocal now, along with, candidly, the party's just more indifferent to him, as we're seeing before. Not just the leaders, but the rank and file, too.
Maria Teresa, it does feel as if even when McCarthy becomes Speaker, he's going to be extraordinarily weak. Whatever it takes for him to become Speaker is going to put him sort of at the mercy of about 8 to 10 House Republicans.
Well, and I think that this is what he built. And I would say the same thing with McConnell. Had McConnell trusted his initial instinct and McCarthy his initial
pushing back
at Trump in the beginning, they wouldn't be in this place. And I think you and I have talked about it, off camera. And now he basically, this is what he grew because he didn't have the political backbone. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see what are the compromises he's going to have to make if he does decide to split up this omnibus bill that we're seeing.
Yeah, I just, we'll see. I think we all know these guys want to get out of town. They're not shutting down the government. They're going to agree to something. So I kind of feel like the minutia here is not worth diving deep into. I haven't heard a
word about it at the White House.
Yeah, nobody.
They're not on their.
No, but I think his calculation is that he's going to be all of a sudden having to talk about entitlement programs right before a presidential campaign where you're not going to want to.
No, I was just going to say he should secretly want all this cleared.
Exactly right.
You should want the decks cleared, wouldn't you, Matt?
Yes and no. Look, I think there's not going to be a ton done, but there will be leverage points, whether it's the budget fights, debt ceiling, farm bill, and others, where Republicans have some leverage. But you're right.
All right, I want to pivot to this border because this feels like an unforced error by the administration if this turns out to be a disastrous thing. Jeff, I made the point earlier. Nobody wants to solve this problem. Well, I'm not saying they don't, but everybody is afraid of the solution or proposing a solution because of the politics of this. The White House seems like that they're cowering over this problem.
I mean, I think it's not good timing ever for a crisis. It's probably really good for Biden that this is happening now instead of 3 weeks ago.
Or a month and a half ago.
Or a month and a half ago in terms of, I mean, it is an issue that, as we all know, Republicans will jump on and will no doubt make an even bigger issue going into the presidential campaigns that are going to start kicking off in the next few months. But unforced error indeed. And this president is in charge. The people in the White House now are in charge, and it's their problem to fix.
Right, Teresa, the fact that they have to consider a transit ban and that there's some openly talking about instituting Title 42, to me, that's reflective of they never had a plan in the first place, so they're now stuck with the tools that they can find.
Well, they're old tools, and they were blunt instruments that were put in place by the Trump administration, who had no, caring for the people that were going to be impacted. I do think, though, the fact that we are now depending on Sinema and Tillis to come up with a DACA bill
Do you believe that's
speaks
gonna happen?
No. Well, I don't know, but the fact
There's a lot of happy talk last week about it, not this week, is there?
Well, and that's the problem, right? So the fact that they have them there, I was in the steering committee today, and I heard that they're giving her 48 hours. This was the opportunity for the Democrats really to come in with some sort of immigration bill to at least deal with the other deal with Title 42, and they haven't, and I think that's going to be a problem.
Matt, the real issue is that there's not a lot of Republicans who think a compromise they can sell politically, and it feels like this is what we're trapped in. There's not enough Republicans who will play ball on sort of reasonable immigration reform because of the fear that anything you do, look at who's doing, anything you do, amnesty. Like, it just doesn't matter.
No, I think that's true. And I think one of the things, too, is it creates a contrast with the person you mentioned before. The point person is Kamala Harris, right? So they want that contrast going into a presidential election, especially when it's going to be, I think, one of the hot topics. And I think, to your point about the Biden administration, I think it's important that they not learn the wrong lessons. Just because the border wasn't a salient issue in 22 doesn't mean it won't be in 24.
Yeah, but the Democrats have to get out of the sandbox of the Republicans. They're actually playing into this. We actually have two issues in this country. We have the 11 million undocumented individuals and what's happening at the border. And that is when the moment that they can actually divorce those two and recognize that the path to the White House is how do you actually provide some sort of pathway of safety for the 11 million people here. Then they actually have an opportunity to say, okay, now let's figure out what the border is. Because that's a refugee problem. For the last two administrations, people have not paid attention to the southern border and to all the other countries in South America. And that is going to be something that we have to have a conversation on. How do we modernize our immigration system? But they have to divorce it.
What's interesting about you saying that is I think the Democrats did that a little bit on the issue of crime. During the midterm elections. The Republicans looked like they were gaining some ground on talking about crime, painting Democrats as weak on crime. And Democrats went back and said, we're for reducing gun violence. And the polls show that is something that a lot of Americans are also for. And that was a pivot. And it was using the argument against the other party on an issue that actually has a lot of traction on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's right.
What is the immigration debate going to look like in a Republican presidential primary? Because there's really no disagreement.
There really isn't. And I think it's mainly going to be a point that you use against the Biden administration. It's an applause line. It's not something I think you're going to see in our Republican debate stage.
Nobody's going to put out a real serious proposal, are they?
I think on either side, right? Like we saw this in 2022. It's not like you're going to put out happy talk.
If you put out a plan, it gets
But I think
bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also says it all, the fact that the Biden administration continued the Trump-era policy. If Biden doesn't run or in the next series of Democratic primaries, that will be a cudgel, too.
This is what's amazing here, Maria Teresa, is that Stephen Miller's plan on the border is what's going to be implemented by the Biden White House.
I think the challenges of the class of Republicans that are coming in are so anti-immigrant that the Democrats have a chance to defang them. The people who are going to get most hurt are the undocumented families already living here. This is something that folks don't realize. In Arizona and in Nevada, Latino youth are the largest vote share of the Latino population. Mm-hmm. By 2024, we're expecting 160,000 Latino youth to turn 18 just in Arizona. Mm-hmm. Biden won that state by 11,000 votes. You know what their number 2 issue is after the economy? Immigration.
And what is it specifically? When you say immigration, what does that mean?
Immigration.
Does it mean asylum? Does that mean the laws?
No, it means how do you keep my family safe? Mm-hmm. There are 16 million Americans who live in mixed status families, disproportionately Latino youth coming of age. Right. So they mean that how do you protect my TPS mom? How do you protect my dad?
Gotcha.
How do you protect my brother who's a DACA recipient? That is the fastest way to actually fix immigration.
All right, I want to pivot back to Republican presidential politics. New poll today, Ron DeSantis. With a double-digit lead, if the choice is just those two. Is that about DeSantis or Trump, that Wall Street Journal poll, Matt?
I think it's a lot about Trump right now. Again, you have to get to a one-on-one problem or one-on-one race. There's a long time between then and now. We talked about this, getting it down.
I believe Trump's number is 38% no matter what you do.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So it's a matter of how do you add up to that 52%. But look, if you're DeSantis, you play the issues that work for you, and that's COVID, that's down in Florida.
Well, it's funny you bring this up. I have to say, it's both remarkable and, some might say it's very cynical, Jeff. So he announces this sort of, I don't know what to call it, this kangaroo court on COVID and the vaccines on the day that he had to call a special session to deal with the single most unpopular issue for every homeowner, which is what's going on with property insurance. And it is not a deal that is worth bragging about. And he knows it, which is why I'm not surprised that when they had to admit that they basically are giving the insurance industry everything they want, please don't leave the state, please don't leave the state, he announces this. Politically, he knows what he's doing.
For sure.
I just wonder if he's buying time where someday that will bite him.
Well, and this ties in a little bit with your question before, which is this about DeSantis or is it about Trump? I think Trump's numbers are not great. His rollout hasn't been great. But Ron DeSantis, despite a lot of momentum right now, is still untested on the national stage. He's clever politically.
He's really
he does
good at
this kind of
fights
100%.
and doing events.
Very
his governing record isn't that great.
And that this COVID investigation is no doubt part of that. But once he gets out on the stage more and gets asked about some of these things, he may come down from that high.
So a lot of folks often say, why did so many Latinos vote for DeSantis? He kept their small businesses open.
That's right.
And the reason he's doing
right.
And so my guess is the reason he's doing this kangaroo report is that he's going to go to the wider lens of small business owners in America, and he recognizes that he is not a toxic brand like Trump is, and he's going to try to get the moderate independents and perhaps the business owners.
Yeah, no, look,
he's not dumb.
No, not at all. It's been really smart.
He's formidable.
But he does a good job of sort of making sure people don't see hey, pay no attention to what I had to do over here. Yeah. Jeff, Maria Teresa, thank you, and Matt.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.